Hello everyone, it's a great honor for me to give this presentation here. I am Mengjia Wu, a PhD candidate from the University of Technology, Sydney. Today the work I'm going to share with you is named Hierarchical Topic Tree, a hybrid model comprising network analysis and density peak search. To begin with my presentation, I would like to introduce a really common phenomenon in knowledge composition and classification, that is hierarchical structure. As you can see, the two examples I put here, which are respectively from the computer science domain and the medical domain, they already have well-established and well-curated knowledge structure constructed in a hierarchical way. So they can profile research directions or topics on different gradualities and help newcomers to know the landscape of this field, what's happening in this field, and also for the proficient researchers know the other branches of his or her directions. However, most of those hierarchically organized knowledge structure are manually created, which means their construction are time-consuming and also require specific domain knowledge. So in this work, we develop a hierarchical topic tree model that has three highlights. First, it can identify topic hierarchies based on merely document features. And second, it's automatic and adaptable to various domains or disciplines. And third, this is based on network analytics, and it's very easy to fine-tune. It only has one parameter. This flowchart demonstrates our methodology framework. We start with a collection of scientific documents and extract terms from their titles and abstracts. Then we generate a term co-occurrence network, as shown in this figure. Every node represents a term, and the edges represent their co-occurrences, but we do not show edges in this figure to make it clear. After that, we develop two algorithms, which are respectively density peak search algorithm and overlapping community allocation algorithm. So density peak search algorithm is used to identify cluster centers, and overlapping community allocation is used to assign terms into appropriate clusters. Here, overlapping means that one term can be assigned to multiple clusters. So these two algorithms together constitute a complete clustering algorithm. And then we will apply this clustering algorithm iteratively to the network to identify topic hierarchies. I'll use animations to demonstrate this whole process and explain the algorithm details in the following slides. Okay, so let's say that initially we applied density peak search algorithm, and in the first iteration, and just one density peak is found. So in such case, we will just skip this overlapping community allocation in the first iteration because all the terms are by default assigned to the root topic of this identified first density peak. So this peak forms the root topic, and this identified density peak term is used as the topic label. After that, we go to the second iteration. And due to the design of density peak search algorithm, the iteration after the first one, the density peak search will rely on the previously searched results. That means the second round of density peak search will rely on the previously found density peak. Okay, so under such circumstance, we found three more density peaks. And then these three more density peaks, may constitute three clusters, and we apply OCA algorithm to the network. And you can see the three yellow clusters are formed because the terms, yellow nodes distinctively belongs to one of these yellow centers. But also there are some terms with different colors. That means those terms are identified as overlaps. So the blue one is overlap of this left yellow cluster and right yellow cluster, and the white one means that it's overlap of these three yellow clusters. So here, the three yellow cluster form three child topics of the root topic, and then the other overlaps are classified as topic overlap of the second layer. So after this iteration, those topic overlaps will not go into the following iterations, but the three identified child topics in yellow will continue to the following iteration. And in the third iteration, we'll just regard one yellow cluster as an individual network, and then still apply the density peak search. Let's say that we respectively discover 2 density peaks in each yellow cluster, and then the same process overlapping community allocation, and then forms 6 child topics and the corresponding topic overlaps. Then we'll check to see whether new density peaks can be found. If not, we'll just end the iteration and obtain the final topic hierarchical tree at the left side. From this slide, I will introduce the details of our algorithms. Our DPS algorithms was derived from the density peak-based clustering algorithm, which was published on Science in 2014. So this algorithm assumed that the cluster centers are characterized by high density and also should have a relatively large distance from points with higher densities. So the high density means that it should be surrounded with enough points within a certain radius, and it should be as far as away from the other cluster centers. So this method just plot density versus minimum distance to the other higher density points value scatter, and then the points at the top right side are identified as cluster centers. This clustering algorithm has 2 major advantages. First, it's faster because it just uses one-off calculation to determine the cluster centroids, and it's much faster than the other k-means or mean-shift clustering algorithms with more iterations. And second, it can generate more accurate clustering results compared to some density-based clustering algorithms like dbScan. This is according to the author's experiments. However, there are 2 major issues when applying this clustering algorithm to the term co-recurrence network. The first one is how to proxy the distance between terms. Here, we intuitively choose network topological distances. That is, for 2 terms that are directly linked, we will measure the distance by their edge weights. That is the reciprocal of their co-occurring frequency. And if the 2 terms are not directly linked, like these 2, citation analysis and word embedding, we will find a shorter distance between them. And in another case, that if the network is disjointed, like it has several components, we will deal with each component as an individual branch for the final hierarchical topic tree. The other issue is how to identify the centers automatically. In the original DPC algorithm, they will determine the centers by observing the distance versus density plot or observing the decreasing rate of their 2 values production. However, we like to make this process more automatic, so we modify this from 2 aspects. The first one is that we redefine the high density with k nearest neighbor highest density, which means that a high density node should own the highest density among all its k nearest neighbors. And the other modification is from the hierarchical perspective. That is, the distances between the sibling cluster centers should be larger than this sibling cluster center to its parent cluster center. So these are 2 quantitative selection criteria for the density peaks. And this also explains why in the second iteration we'll use the results from the first iteration. The other algorithm we developed is called overlapping community allocation. When the cluster centers are identified, how can we assign the terms appropriately? Intuitively, we will assign them to the closest centers, but in our design, we plan to discover those topic overlaps. So here, if Except for the closed centers, if one term's distance to another center do not exceed a certain ratio, we will also assign them to the second or the third closest center. So if there are 3 cluster centers, there might form 4 different types of cluster overlaps. Finally, to prove the effectiveness of our methodology, we conducted a case study on the computer science domain. We used this search strategy to retrieve those highly cited papers in computer science domain and ended up with 6,267 records. Then we extracted terms from the titles and abstracts and ended up with this term co-occurrence network of 2,000 plus terms with frequency larger than 5. As you can see, this figure is generated by voice viewer and it contains more than 5 clusters, but all the terms are organized on a flat level, so we cannot see how they are organized hierarchically. After this, we applied our hierarchical topic tree model to the co-occurrence network. And in this process, we have only one parameter to be decided, that is the k nearest neighbors k. So we did a sensitive analysis for case value versus the number of identified core terms, which means the first layer's density peaks. So here we choose k to be 10 to obtain a relatively stable result and generate the hierarchical topic tree on the right side. If we have a closer look at the first layer topics and the topic details, we will find that the first layer topics mostly corresponds to the voice viewer results. And also, the term details within each topic are consistent. Then the topic overlaps also make sense. If we look at this topic overlap of 1 and 2, we'll find the machine learning, classification, accuracy, which are the crossing section of deep learning and optimization problems. And also for topic 2 and 4 overlap, we can see R package, MATLAB toolbox, which are applications based on certain operating system, and they are always frequently used in solving optimization problems. At last, we employ some validation measurements to evaluate our methodology. The first one is topic coherence. It indicates how the terms within a certain topic are consistent with each other. So we got an average value of 0.619, and this value we consider is acceptable because it's above 0.5, and we think this value is the larger the better. And for the second one is parent-child association strength. So this one measures how strong the parent nodes are associated with the children. So in this value, we get an average value of 0.847. So for this value, the same, the larger the better, and we accept this result is pretty good. And for last one, we calculate the information loss index. And this calculates how much edge weight we have lost when transforming the co-occurrence network into the hierarchical topic tree. So this value ends up with 6%. We also thought this is a pretty good one. In the last slide, I would like to conclude some limitations and future directions. So the limitations from my perspective are mostly in the validation part. So in this part, we can employ more quantitative indicators and also involve some experiment judgment to help us validate this methodology. And also we should compare it to other existing models like HLDA and other established hierarchical topic models. And in the future study, we have 4 primary directions. The first direction is we can change the case study of local dataset to global dataset, which means we can use the entire database to validate our methodology. And second one is that we can integrate more heterogeneous information into our model. like the author, venue, journal information, this kind of heterogeneous external information. And the third one is that we still have to decide the K before we applying this method. So we anticipate to change it to non-parameter and make it more adaptable and robust. The final direction is that we would like to involve dynamic community detection, which means that we involve the time dimension into this model, try to define how the topic evolve or change, how the hierarchies evolve or change over time. And this is all for my presentation. Hope you're enjoying it, and I welcome any suggestions, comments, and questions. Thank you.